Hello everyone. The latest in the news is the privatization of the Indian Railways. On July 1, 2020, the Ministry of Railways announced that 151 trains operating in 109 pair routes will be operated by the private sector. The private companies are free to choose trains and locomotives of their choice. In fact, the privatization of Indian Railways has been recommended for many decades by the erstwhile Planning Commission of India and now by the Niti Aayog. Liberalizing the entry of new operators in this sector, which has been a government monopoly for many years, is a welcome move which many believe will be the way forward for having good services and also for the growth of the rail sector. But privatization of railways has its own merits and demerits. In this video, let us see what is the background to this decision, why this decision has been taken now, and what is the objective. What are the pros and cons of privatization of railways, and whether private railway operation will be sustainable. Recently, the Indian Railways initiated the process allowing private firms to operate passenger trains on its network through 151 new trains. While these trains will form a minuscule portion of the entire railway network, this probably marks the beginning of private sector participation in passenger train operations. It has invited requests for qualification proposals for scrutiny of vendor capabilities from those who can bring modern trains into operations on existing rail infrastructure. For the time being, the scheduled passenger train services remain paralyzed due to COVID-19 pandemic, and various railways have been running only special trains such as those for workers. In spite of this, the Railway Board has moved ahead with a long pending plan, setting a tentative schedule for private train operations expected to begin in April 2023 and in 12 clusters. Each train will have 16 coaches, and these will be high-speed trains with a maximum speed of 160 km per hour. The present move taken by the government is a step towards competing passenger train operations, bringing new generation trains and attracting investments of an estimated Rs 30,000 crore. This will accelerate development of railway infrastructure in socially and economically backward regions and will also help in upgrading existing infrastructure for running more trains with higher speeds. The plan to allow private entities was started back in 2019 with a bidding process in December 2019. According to an Economic Times report, the first bidding process saw about 20 companies into infrastructure and transport and business express interest. These include Adani Ports and Logistics, Tata Realty and Infrastructure, SL Group, Bombardier India, Alstom and Macquarie Group. However, this was before the coronavirus pandemic. But whether these companies would be interested in the post-COVID world is yet to be seen. However, given that these players have implemented multiple infrastructure projects of the government in the past, and with the financial strength that they have, they could be potential contenders. Several committees in the past have expressed expansion and the modernization of Indian Railways. In 2015, the expert panel chaired by Bibek Debroy, constituted by the Ministry of Railways, recommended that the way forward for the railways was liberalization and not privatization, in order to allow entry of new operators, to encourage growth and improve services. It also made it clear that a regulatory mechanism was a prerequisite to promote healthy competition and protect the interests of all stakeholders. The present invitation for private operators to submit qualifications bids for 151 trains would be in the assessment of the Railway Board only for a fraction of the total train operations, that is 5% of the 2,800 mail and express services operated by Indian Railways. The overall objective, however, is to introduce a new train travel experience for passengers who are used to traveling by aircraft and air-conditioned buses. Moreover, India is a lucrative market with huge land mass and population which needs rail connectivity both in rural and urban areas. Also, given the fact that India has physical deficit, the government does not want to increase it further and would like to keep the debt to GDP ratio as low as possible. From a passenger perspective, there is a need for more train services, particularly between big cities. The railway board says 5 crore intending passengers would not be accommodated during 2019 and 20 for want of capacity, and there was nearly 13% travel demand in excess of supply during summer and festival seasons. As such, without an expansion and with growth of road travel, the share of the railways would steadily decline in the future years. Railways, which is one of the largest organizations in the country, operating not just trains for passengers and freight but also social institutions such as hospitals and schools, it represents a radical change. According to the World Bank, in 2018, India had 68,400 route kilometers of railways, which makes it among the 5 largest rail networks in the world, along with the United States, China, and Russia. Having said this, India covers geographical area much less than Germany, Russia, China, or Canada, which indicates more scope for expansion. Various analysis of passenger and freight operations in the railways showed that as a steady shift to other modes of travel was affecting economic growth by as much as 4.5% of GDP. Moreover, it is also noted that passengers were willing to pay more if they are guaranteed with better quality of travel and ease of access. As such, the move to privatize and augment capacity through private capital in train operations supports this decision. Adding to this, the tax money collected by government is not enough to meet all ends, and to support growth and capital expenditure, privatization looks to be a better option as it will bring more money to the government. Train services operated by Indian Railways cover several classes of passengers, connecting remote locations, thereby meeting the social service obligation and adopting the philosophy of cross-subsidy for passengers in low-cost trains through higher freight tariffs. In more recent years, it has focused on revenue generation through dynamic demand-based pricing. Private operators are not expected to shoulder the burden of service norms and will more or less focus more on revenue. Even the first IRCTC-run trains have a higher cost of travel than a Shatabdi train on the same route that almost matches it for speed. So private operators would have to raise the level of their offering even higher to justify higher fares and attract a particular segment of the population who will be ready to pay for the cost difference. The key to this development will be the independent regulator recommended by expert committees. Before the pandemic struck, the Government of India had notified the resolution to set up a Rail Development Authority as an advisory body, advising government on, among other things, promoting competition, efficiency and economy, and protecting consumer interests. With this background, let us look at the merits and demerits pertaining to the privatization of Indian Railways. A strong argument in favor of privatization is that it will lead to better infrastructure, which will probably lead to improved safety, improved amenities, and reduction in travel time, etc. It is expected that private company will ensure all these. Secondly, Indian Railway Services is also subject to issues like lack of punctuality, mismanagement in the form of stinking washrooms, lack of water supply, and dirty platforms. Privatization may solve these issues, as the move would foster competition and hence lead to overall betterment in the quality of services. Privatization may also help Indian Railways to become world-class network by bringing in latest technology in railway coaches, safety and overall travelling experience. Lastly, train accidents are a nightmare for travellers and authorities alike, but as private ownership is synonymous with better maintenance, it is therefore believed that it will reduce the number of accidents, thereby resulting in safe travel and good savings in the long run. Now, let us look at the demerits of privatization. Indian Railways, being government owned, has an advantage as it provides nationwide connectivity to bring regional development, which may not be possible with privatization, as routes which are not popular may be neglected. This can render some parts of the country inaccessible and lack of development in these areas. Secondly, given that a private sector runs on profit, it may be assumed that the easiest way of making profits would be to hike fares, and this will not justify the purpose of Indian Railways, which is meant to serve the entire population irrespective of their level of income. We all know that Indian Railways tend to cross-subsidize passenger fares through freight revenue, translating to below-cost pricing. This will make it difficult for private players to compete due to conflict of interest and would undermine the fair competition between private and government railway operations. Accountability will be another issue, because private companies are unpredictable in their dealings and do not share their governance secrets, and as such it will be difficult to pinpoint any accountability on a particular entity if there is any discrepancy. Moreover, it is also pertinent to mention here that the move by the railways to privatize routes has also been criticized by opposition parties, which have alleged that the poor people's lifeline was being taken away. to this, Railway Board has clarified that only 5% of the trains are being given to private operators, whereas 95% of them will be run by railways based on the fare structure fixed by the national transporter. The Indian Railways carries over 23 million, mostly poor passengers, in about 13,000 trains daily. Many countries have privatized parts or all of their railway operations. UK, Japan, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Mexico, Germany, and so on. Many of these countries had begun a century or more ago with private railways, nationalized them when railway companies ran into trouble, and are now rolling back state ownership of private operations. India too began with private railway companies in the middle of the 19th century, nationalized them in 1951, and is now taking the first tentative steps in this direction. Ports and shipping, airports and airlines, passenger bus and trucking services already has been private dominance. Only the railways remain a government monopoly. The objective of this initiative should be to introduce modern technology with reduced maintenance and travel time, encourage job creation, enhance safety, and to provide better travel experience to passengers, thereby reducing demand-supply deficit in this sector. As a way forward, what is needed is to revisit the pricing model to make the passenger and freight segment sustainable, setting up an independent regulator so as to create a level playing field for private players, and also to expedite the process of establishing the Rail Development Authority as approved by the government. It would be better to incorporate the merits of both private and government enterprises so as to enhance the image of Indian Railways as it continues to serve our nation. Thank you.